Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on the golden thread of modern schedule management solutions, sponsored by Oracle Construction and Engineering. I'm Shannon Derejo from Creamer Media's Contracts Publishing, and I'll be your host this afternoon. Today's webinar will examine how modern project schedule management solutions directly impact capital project execution effectiveness. Our panelists will explain how you can accelerate capital project improvements through the golden thread of modern schedule management solutions. The speakers joining us today are Werner Maritz, Director of Industry Strategy at Oracle Construction and Engineering, Terence Hill, Director for the Global Project Management Office at Tronox, Eben van Wyk, Solution Engineer at Oracle Construction and Engineering, and Karthik Venkata Subramanian, Global VP for Data Strategy and Development at Oracle Construction and Engineering. To encourage interaction, we have enabled the chat and the Q&A function. Please post your questions into the Q&A box, which you'll find on the panel at the bottom of your screen. The panelists will answer as many of your questions as possible at the end of the session. You can also interact with the panelists and other attendees in the chat box, which you'll also find at the bottom of your screen. Please be aware that we are recording the webinar and we'll send you a copy of the recording when it's available. We're also streaming the webinar live on YouTube. So let's get started. In the first section of our discussion this afternoon, Werner Maritz and Terence Hill will explore a real-world project management office at Tronox. Werner is a member of the industry strategy team at Oracle Construction and Engineering Global Business Unit, focusing on public sector and infrastructure development programs. As a certified cost professional, he has a passion for the digital transformation of the project and construction management disciplines, with a keen interest in the role BIM plays in improving project profitability, managing project risk, and reducing construction costs. Our second guest is Terence Hill. He is the Director of the Global Project Management Office at Tronox. Terence's career, starting in 1997 in mining and projects, has grown him from a technical specialist to a technical manager and on towards multidisciplinary and project management on complex multi-billion rand ventures. His current position encompasses portfolio management and project controls for a global vertically integrated company. So Werner, can you tell us a bit about Oracle Construction and Engineering and why your group has such a strong focus on project schedule management?
Afternoon, and thanks Shannon, and thanks for the opportunity for Creamer Media to help us to bring this important discussion to the engineering and construction community. So globally we see an increased number of large and mega projects, right? Even here in sub-Saharan Africa, especially in infrastructure, natural resources, energy, telco and real estate sectors. And we expect the number of projects to increase over time as various economic stimulus programs kick into gear and commodity cycles continue. Even with decarbonization and environmental sustainability drivers, the number of green projects or green investment projects are rapidly increasing. So overall, capital expenditure is on the rise over time, globally and even in sub-Saharan Africa. We see a long path between the identification of project opportunities, the project evaluation phase, the project development phase, eventually securing financing for these projects, and then the eventual construction of the project. At each phase handover point, unfortunately, information ownership also tends to change. And project knowledge and detailed information is lost along the way when a common data environment is not used on these projects. We also see very complex project supply chains, global supply chains, between project owners, engineers, maintenance subcontractors, suppliers, consultants, and that results in so many data silos and so many disparate and legacy systems that actually manages project information. And that means that project on time and on budget delivery performance is not what we expect it to be. I mean, we've been constructing big assets for a long time. We should have been doing much better by now. We also see quite a low productivity in the global construction sector, especially when we compare that to industry sectors like manufacturing or financial services. And we attribute this to quite a low rate of technology adoption across project and construction management organizations. So as a leading technology company, Oracle Construction and Engineering is helping project owners and implementation teams in both public and private sectors globally to create significant business value and productivity improvements through digital transformation in the capital projects environment. So in today's discussion, we're going to focus on aspects related to the project schedule. It's the central construct of the project which really define and coordinate all the work of the entire project supply chain, from ideation of the project through to the design phase, the delivery phase, into commissioning and eventual handover of the asset to the customer. So trustworthy schedule information is truly the golden thread through the project delivery process. Without it, everybody is lost on that project. So in today's discussion, we're going to hear three viewpoints. So first, Terence is going to show us how Tronox is pursuing a digital transformation in their global projects environment. We'll also hear then from Evan, who is going to talk to us about the consolidated project environment with a cloud-first strategy. And last, we're going to hear from Karthik, how organizations can leverage their data to reduce project risk and make better decisions with the help of artificial intelligence and machine learning technology. This is truly an interesting topic, and I'm so glad Karthik could join us all the way from Australia for this discussion today. So let me welcome Terence. And Terence, thank you very much for sharing some of the insights on the Tronox journey with project control solutions. So Terence, tell me a little bit about Tronox as a company, please.
Yeah, thanks, Van, and thanks to Oracle and Kramer Media for giving me the opportunity. Tronox is a company. We've got 6,500 employees operating on 6 different continents. So lots of time zones that are affecting us. Our focus on sustainability has been the highest it's ever been in the company. In terms of what do we produce inorganic chemicals for business. The company's mines and processes titanium ore, zircon, and other minerals. And we manufacture titanium dioxide pigments, and that adds brightness to pretty much most of the products in paints, plastics, papers, and every other day products. So in short, anything that's white has generally got our product in it. In terms of global presence, the screen that you're seeing now is showing where our employees are located across the world. And we've got an unmatched vertically integrated model. It's unparalleled operating and technical expertise across our value chain. And that positions Tronox really as a preeminent titanium dioxide producer in the world. Tronox is also on a large digitization drive, as well as modernization, and we're expecting quite a large value unlock from that exercise for our shareholders.
Yeah, thanks. Tronox is quite an amazing company in terms of those very bright white pigments that's being produced. So, Terence, you mentioned the digitization drive, and I was wondering what sort of KPIs are Tronox really looking for achieving through digitization or digital transformation within the business?
Yes, I think there's a couple that I can mention, and the first one would definitely be standardization. The more people work on the same platform, the more we can work similarly, and we can leverage that from the team. Lowering our production cost per ton is obviously a target, and the lower we can get that, the more value there would be for both our clients as well as for our shareholders. And then some of our plants are actually about 7 years old. So in the automation side of this, we're also looking to improve throughput of our business and make it a bit more reliable and sustainable. Another important factor would be, how do we react to the market? We want faster market reaction times, and we want real-time analytics. And lastly, I'd say we want our teams to actually collaborate on a greater scale, and get people to be able to work across multiple regions so that all our employees can interact on a daily basis. So collaboration across the digital platforms that we create.
And with that global footprint, I think collaboration is quite an important aspect. Now,
Yes.
you've mentioned a couple of KPIs that you're pursuing, and also from a vertically integrated producer. What type of projects do you actually undertake within the Tronox portfolio? I mean, it's not just mining projects, right?
Broadly, we do mine expansions, new mine establishment, but in that we have beneficiation plant expansions, pigment plant expansions. We also do refurbishment and repair projects for our operational teams. That actually covers pretty much most of it.
And I know you guys have got quite a good projects office established within Tronox. But what type of project delivery models do you actually pursue within Tronox to deliver these wide-ranging projects?
Yeah, we pretty much, I'll focus on the large projects in the response. Our project model is an in-house project management team. Although we often source external people to come into those project teams because it is a shortish duration, generally about 2 years. But the reason for doing the in-house project management is that we want the management teams to retain control, manage all the interfaces, and be responsible for all the aspects of the project. We will use EPCM models and turnkey as well, if that's the right model for that particular project, but we do that to a limited degree. There's also a couple of other models which we'll use if that's appropriate, like a boot type option as well.
So with an environment with a lot of self-performing activities within the project delivery process, what does your project controls environment look like at the moment? I mean, it's quite a diverse company from a technology perspective, but also geographies. So yes. What does that project control environment look like at the moment?
We have a number of regional systems. Tronox has acquired a few companies over the last couple of years, and thus the push for a standardized approach. But we need to keep enough flexibility in that standardization to deal with the local legislative requirements as well. So if I focus on a systems response, it will cover mainly the large projects, a little bit on the smaller ones as well. But generally, we use Oracle Unify from a cost control point of view, P6 for scheduling, SharePoint and Aconex from a document control point of view and a collaboration environment, Oracle BI for analytics and reporting. On the portfolio management side, we also have Instantis, and then we use an Instantis for the portfolio management side, and then Power BI and OneStream so that we can actually do reporting across multiple ERP systems at the moment. So because we're not standardized, we need various tools to try and bring that all together. We've also migrated most of our product into the cloud now from the on-premise server-based solutions. But I think the one thing which still stands out is that our contractors are not inside our systems. So they can't process their own progress certificates or do schedule updates directly into our schedules.
Okay. And what sort of challenges do you experience with project schedule development and schedule management across the organization, plus the contractors as you pointed out?
I'd say the biggest challenge is making sure the full scope is actually in the schedule. So the golden thread is that you must capture all your scope. And we've got quite a few hidden tasks and people don't allocate time to it. And when I say hidden, it's a bit of an inverted commas phrase, because if we don't know about it or we don't allocate the time to it, it becomes hidden in the schedule. If I have to elaborate a little bit more, if we applied the same cost principles to scheduling as then we would actually have more activities in our schedules. We'd have more labels in the schedules, and we'd also have schedule contingency. I think schedule contingency is one of the things which stands out for me as missing, and a challenge to actually get teams to do it. Often the reason for that is because we're late, and we crunch our projects into the last bit from our preceding phases before we go into implementation. And then for some reason, people always are a little bit optimistic. And they neglect to allocate sufficient time to activities. From a management point of view, I think we need to import our contractor schedules into our master schedules, and that does result in duplicate or double capturing, as well as how do you weight a schedule? Is it fully resource loaded? And how do you do it? There's many methods of doing that so that we can actually evaluate what's the true progress on the schedule. Contractors also don't build their risks into the schedule for obvious reasons, but that does make managing a schedule quite problematic. And then getting the right people to develop the detail in the schedule is also a challenge. You want the person doing the work to actually develop that detail. Using scheduling tools is also a challenge. We wanted the scheduling tool to be easy to use for a number of different resource levels. And that's why we quite often have contractors sort of steering clear a little bit of the P6 environment because it's a bit more complicated. Mobile app interfaces and looking at how we can use that in the field is also a bit challenging at the moment, but that's definitely something that's improving. And then linking the project phase schedule detail into our project portfolio management tools is also a challenge. The final challenge, I think, is truly making the schedule the golden thread in the project. Everyone needs to have access to it. They need to ensure that their scope is in the schedule and it's to the right level of detail so that they can manage their scope.
Yeah. So Terence, you've mentioned a number of challenges there. What sort of management practices have you got in place to overcome some of those challenges? I mean, you've got an active business to run, a big portfolio to manage. You can't just sit on the sideline and wait for things to get better. What sort of management actions do you institute?
Okay, let's touch on that. I think the first and foremost, we do subscribe to international project management practices. We apply PMBOK within the organization. And to ensure that we've covered the full scope of the project, we have an extensive check sheet so that we can assess the maturity level of the deliverables in the specific phase. When we do that, we try and do that at the beginning of the phase as well as at the end of the phase. And the reason for doing that is there can be quite a long delay between a feasibility study and when we actually implement a project. And we want to make sure that the deliverables are still at the right standard. And secondly, project teams change so that when they do the assessment, they actually figure out where the information is and they see whether they agree with the previous team's assessment or not. If they don't, then they have enough time to actually start looking at how to address those risks and making correct contingent plans associated to it. We also try and ensure a more cost-like focus on the detail and scheduling. It's largely done via awareness and training. And one of the aspects of that is we try not to allow long duration activities. We want people to break it down so that we can get to the correct activity duration. Sometimes, as a simple example, if people want to cast a concrete plinth, some people will say, no, it'll take me 3 days, and others will tell you it'll take 8 weeks. Which one's right? Well, if you start breaking it down and say, I'm going to order the rebar, I'm going to bend the rebar, I'm going to deliver it to site, I'm going to dig the hole, I'm going to put the blinding in, I'm going to cast the concrete, I'm going to allow it to cure, you're going to get to somewhere around the 8-week mark, as a simple example. So I think once we start breaking things down, then that starts giving the correct durations in the schedule. In terms of getting contractor updates in, we issue master schedules with key activity levels in that. Obviously, that's rolled up to a certain amount, but we still have a double capturing element in that. So when they give it back in the format to roll into our master schedule, we've got to recapture that on a manual basis. We also issue a requirements document out to our vendors to tell them how we want them to schedule. Many ways to do scheduling, and if we can standardize that amongst our vendors, then we get a better result as well. And we also ask our contractors for their risk register. They are a little loath to do that, but that helps us assess what risks we need to start considering in our overall project schedules.
Yeah. Now, Terence, in an ideal world scenario, sort of what will help you to improve your productivity of your scheduling community? I know it's quite a wide community with a wide skills band within that community, but what from a systems or process point of view will really help you to improve productivity related to scheduling?
And I think first and foremost, probably one system for all role players. That would be first prize. So it gives us one capturing point, one verification point, one audit trail. But to make that work, the master schedule needs to have the linkages controlled from the client side. If we're going to re-baseline, the system should allow for approvals via the system, both for the contractor and for internal vendors. And quite often we also leave out our internal vendors. It's important that we put those internal vendors into the scope, so our own project staff tasks. Then in terms of the contractor schedule generation, I think if we could get the capturing of the detail from the supervisor point of view or the team leader level, then that will also improve the execution of the project. The person doing the work has now planned it, and the plan's partly in their head as well as on paper, and that makes it easier to execute. The other one would be that system would obviously only need to allow the contractor to see their own scope of work and not everybody's, because that can have some commercial and contractual implications. And then using probabilistic methods to calculate schedule contingency, that there's a methodical method in terms of how we calculate that duration. And then again, engaging the work executor on the coalface. So everybody needs to have access to that schedule. Quite often we'll find that contractors will use a schedule as a commercial tool rather than as a work management tool, and we want to promote the work management side of it. Obviously the commercial is important, but work management execution, if we're doing things on time, then there's less problems with the commercial aspect. And then I'd say with the world moving into the mobile app environment, if we can get more people to update that schedule physically in the field, our schedule maturity and reliability is also going to improve.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Terence, for this sort of real-world insights and experience of scheduling on the ground. We wish you well on your digital transformation journey as we assist you through that as well. But stick around. I'm sure that our audience have got a lot of questions for you at the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Man. Thank you.
So I think next, let's move on to Eben. Eben van Wyk is a Senior Solutions Engineer within Oracle Construction and Engineering. And it's his task to help our customers to put in the correct solution architecture to meet their requirements to do so. So even Oracle Construction and Engineering is on a strong drive to help the construction industry leverage the benefits presented by digital transformation, especially with the Oracle Smart Construction platform that was recently announced and released. So one of the cornerstone applications in this platform is Primavera Cloud, Oracle Primavera Cloud. Can you give us some insights on what sets Oracle Primavera Cloud apart from traditional point solutions used for project scheduling?
Certainly, Werner. Thank you for having us on the session today as well. So Primavera Cloud is a cloud-native development. So we were using some of the best practice technology like P6 scheduling as an example for our scheduling engine and algorithms as an example. Our clients are always on the latest version. So any new developments are pushed out regularly. Collaboration platform, Terence was mentioning that one of the key issues were around collaboration. And here, we can bring in the extended project team. So both from an office perspective as well as from a field perspective. And this also allows for both the owner organization like Tronox, as well as delivery teams working for Tronox, be it internal teams as well as external teams. And then we look at multiple device support. So bringing that device out to the field team. Current calculations roughly estimate about 2.6 devices per working age. So that's between 16 and 60 years in Africa. So I don't know what the 0.6 is about, but let's stick to that. So Apple devices, Android devices, as well as Windows PCs and laptops. So it caters for the whole team end to end. And then the deployment model is of such a nature that we can cater for a few users up to unlimited users. It's easy and quick to deploy, and we don't allow any customization, so that it's all configuration.
Excellent. So the asset lifecycle for a project owner really starts sort of with the investment decision and the timing and the schedule of the capital expenditure plan. Can you tell us about the portfolio and capital planning capability of Oracle Primavera Cloud as the start of the real process scheduling within the organization?
Certainly. So portfolio schedule plans. I would think that we are talking about the golden thread, and the golden thread of a schedule can be as simple as a start and finish date, or planned start and planned finish date that we fill in when we do a project take-on proposal or an idea that we log, or it can be as a fully developed project schedule for in-flight projects contributing to the portfolio. As you can see here, this is a total planned projects portfolio that a portfolio manager can look at. And then when we look at the portfolio management, one of the key breakdowns in project execution is if the project is not aligned to corporate strategy or to some other strategy and strategic objectives, KPIs, measurements, etc., that we need to bring in. And the central repository that we create of projects and newly proposed projects, we can allow the user to prioritize, categorize, bring in the projects and align that to corporate strategy. The other thing is the budget planning, because we need to do capital planning, look at investment planning from a corporate perspective. And here again, the top-down planning and approvals, we allow for scenario planning as an example. So we can go and look at the best mix of in-flight projects, maintaining our assets, and also bringing in new proposals from that perspective. And we allow for discussions, we allow for reviews, we allow for approvals, like Terence has alluded to. Then also your enterprise workforce planning, because it is around not only the money available, but it's also resources. And because we allow the whole team, so it's not only the office or the owner organizations, but also the delivery teams, we can go and look at a holistic view of that enterprise resources and the availability thereof, because we'll see later on in our conversation around collaboration, because our contractors can now also start loading the resources that they would like to use on the project into this, and we can go and look at availability either by role or by resource. Then waterline, so we can look at cost adjustments as well. So if the particular project or projects in our portfolio meet our cutoff criteria, and we can go and do waterline analysis on that, we can certainly make sure that the right projects are being executed. And then funding traceability. So if we are working not only with just our own funds, but we need to bring in external funding, for instance, with a local community development around our project or a new site that we need to develop, we can also go and look at assigning that funds and manage the right projects with simplified worksheets in the system. And then the prioritization. So we need to look at bringing that list of stuff that can typically make up the portfolio assignments. So here we can prioritize by means of investor maps like we see here, or we can also go and look at prioritization matrices in our solution. And then the key one is to go and roll that up. So performance tracking of this portfolio, because it's not only about approving it, but we also need to make sure that, for instance, benefit realization or specific or yields or whatever we need to bring in can be tracked.
Yeah, that's excellent. What I specifically like is it's quite a friendly user interface even.
Yes, it is. Yes.
So the other thing is, as the complexity of assets increase, if we think about the whole mine or a whole power station, so as the complexity increase, so does the complexity of that project delivery structure, of course, increases. So many project owners choose to take a program delivery approach, not just a project delivery approach. Can you maybe share with us how Primavera Cloud can actually enable project owners to manage complex programs?
Can certainly do that. From a program perspective, we can also equate it to a master schedule. Terence mentioned master schedules and wanting to bring in the contractors into that master schedule. But in this case, a new development or some projects can be brought in. And yeah, I've taken some creative license on putting down a Kalahari mineral sands program as an example. One of the things that stands out right on top on the right hand side is evaluation score, and that evaluation score again is the individual projects and programs. How does this align to my corporate strategy and KPIs? So in this case, it's 80% alignment, which is already good enough in its own sense. But then we have 3 projects. So in this case, it's a simple program, but it already aligns with that. And if we then go into this, we can go and find dashboards. So we can have live streaming, for instance. What does our job site look like? An overview, maybe on a program level, we've got risks. So Terence also talked about looking at risks, and it can go down from a program level all the way down to the contractor schedule. We don't know yet because it's a new development, so that's why I've got a question mark in there in terms of a photo. But then we look at my critical path schedule. So in this case, it is the integrated program critical path. So here, the top project, for instance, is my contractor project, so contract number 17, to do a environmental impact assessment study for this new development, and then the phase 1 project, as well as a couple of others that we can track. And for those not familiar with Gantt schedules, let's just stick here. So the red indicators are the critical path, and then where you see little blue ones, that would be the non-critical activities. And then when we go down into the program, we obviously need to take into consideration the project's resources, which we're going to maybe cover in a little bit of detail later. But here would be the program resources that is on the program itself. And then we also need to look at the over allocation of those resources. In this case, the poor person that we are looking at, Sarah Cooper, she's over allocated in this period that we are currently looking at. So she doesn't have any availability as we speak. So again, the information is real time. It is simply shown, and you can act on that information very quickly.
Okay, excellent. So also some of the challenges Terence shared with us, it's related to schedule development and updating process between the project owner and the subcontractors working on the project, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can Primavera Cloud enable the development and the management of a master schedule and subcontractor schedules in a single collaborative environment? And I think that was the crux of the challenge, is the single collaborative environment for all the stakeholders to work in. Can you share some of that with us?
We can. So from here, collaboration is key. And here I've got my super contractor, Mr. Clark Kent. He's in his own workspace. So Terence was very clear that some of the key things would be around the isolation from other information and from other contractors' information. So in this case, we've got a concept called workspaces, and the workspace you can allocate to a particular contractor or particular external party. And within that workspace, that contractor is then allowed to work without accessing any of the other information from anybody else. So here's my contractor, and you can see that he's got a specific place. And when we go down, that's his only contract. So, or the only schedule at the moment, because it's contract number 17 and the EIA study that needs to be done. So you can see already from the previous part that from a Tronox perspective or from an owner perspective, you've got access because it's lower down into your organization's setup. You already have access, and you've got visibility into those execution work plans, as Terence said or alluded to. So it's not about this is my commercial plan, this is my execution plan, and I need to then make sure how this execution plan is affecting my or the rest of the program. And that can be communicated as well. And this is where the collaboration comes in, because in line with the particular activities, it's like a social media for project management. And here, the contractor has asked me, are we still on track for the contract award on the 16th of August? And the owner has come back and said, yes, we have started. Good luck on the EIA. So it's there. And then together with this, it's also mobile, because we need to place the task work in the pockets of the field teams. And the best way to do that is via mobile device. And here I'm just showing you some of the real-time information that the field workers can have access to. And again, I need to also, we were talking about this earlier, but something that I didn't mention is that with the mobile device, you can take the mobile device offline. So if you need to go into a secure or a safety area where you're not allowed to have any signals whatsoever, you can take your mobile device, you sync before you go into that secure environment, and then you can bring your tasks with you and then update it in the field, have access to drawings or photographs or whatever you require to execute your tasks assigned to you. And then once you are back out of that area, you can then resync that information back up into the office environment.
Okay, excellent. So, Evan, yes, here's a question close to my heart in terms of digital transformation. We also have an application called Primavera Risk Analysis, which is a super cool risk management tool. Unfortunately, it is single user based. So moving forward into digital transformation, how can Primavera Cloud help us from a consolidated view on project risk registers for multiple stakeholders in this collaborative environment? So bring risk to the team, not to the risk manager's laptop alone.
Oh yeah, we could do that within the same solution. So Terence was asking about it and talking about it. So yeah, I've got, first of all, just looking at the risk uncertainty and risk checks, because that was mentioned as well. So let me start there, and then we cover the risk aspect. So from a contractor perspective, they sometimes not aware of logging risk, or they are scared to log risk, as Terence said. So what we can do with our schedules is we can bring in that risk uncertainty, or we can even check the health of our project. So let's start with that. I'm going to come back to your question on risk. I think we've skipped something in here, but let me kick off with this one. So schedule health, we can check the schedule health as well. We can bring in the scoring. We can look at that late activities, or maybe when we bring in the risk contingency, we can bring that and have visibility around that. So from that, and then inside our schedules, we can compare the schedules. So compare the original planning baseline versus the current schedule. And then if we go into the risk, here is a sample of the program level risk. So on the program level risk, we have those. So we can look at probability, the schedule, as well as the impact, and then also score it around the cost impact. But then at the same time, we have the contractor has actually brought in some risk in terms of his schedule. So that EIA, in this case, it could be project not starting on time, but we know that it started on time, so it had a low probability of happening. But then in the projects itself, we also have a built-in risk log. So again, the qualitative side of the risk management, and then we do the pre and post response. Now, that tool that you were talking about, we also allow for that. So here's just the project level risk. And based on the project level risks, we need to go and look at the probability of those risks and what the impact of that risks are. So yeah, you can see we've got the risk register as well as the risk analysis. And voila, we can drill into that risk and run the risk analysis. In this case, you can see that we've run about 550 different iterations, and we come back with a optimistic finish date of the 20th of September 2023, whereas our most likely finish date would be around the 31st of January 2024, which is slightly lower or way later. And then we know that there's also a maximum or pessimistic finish of around 12th of June 2024. And also that contingency. So here we can see that that risk contingency that Terence was talking about. We've got 196 days of risk contingency built into this because of that that optimistic, likely, as well as the pessimistic finish and the effect on this. And then once we have done, we can go and look at if those risks have been properly managed through action plans or properly mitigated, and how do we look in terms of this? So remember that the optimistic finish was around 21st of September 2023. So now our most likely finish date has moved forward from January 2024 to September 2023. So already we've saved quite a significant amount of days, and our contingency is now less because we know that we've mitigated this risk. Together with this, we can also go and look at what the real impact is of each one of these risks that we've logged. So that earlier risk log that we had, we can see that here, for instance, 37 days, if risk number 3 materialized, pre our mitigation, pre our action plans. And what happens now? We can see that we've got some opportunities like reusing the templates on our projects, maybe implementing best practices, implementing task management. And then our risk number 3 has now fallen all the way down to only have a 2.7% impact or 2.7 day impact on our total schedule. And then the other one that I also talked about, and what Terence was also wanting, is around uncertainty. So with contingency built into our schedules, we can either go and add, there are a number of ways of doing this, and we must not confuse this with float, which is the calculation, and algorithms with critical path management. Yeah, it is schedule contingency without the need of building out massive risk logs. Like Terence has said, the one plinth might take 3 days or 5 days or 8 days, depending on the curing of the concrete. But then there's one outlier that can take 8 weeks. And in this case, we can go and build that in with minimum durations, most likely durations, as well as maximum duration. So that risk uncertainty, we can go and build this in to allow for a low, medium, or high. So if we know that this type of plinth that we are implementing is actually taking 8 weeks, so we might have that maximum duration set to 8 weeks. So if this is the type, we can go and put it there. And then once we've set it, we can go and apply that risk uncertainty to the schedule, and then eventually compare that to the baseline. So we've taken baselines, we can do unlimited baselines effectively, and we can then go and compare, because I started the other way around, my schedule comparison, we can go and compare at any time to my baseline or a point in time in history or to similar projects. We can go and compare that.
Excellent. So, Evan, I know you can keep going for 14 days about this, because it's an interesting topic. So, one last tool that we're giving to the planners. Some of my friends in industry have, in the past year or so, really started looking at last planner methodology and lean scheduling on the construction site. in 2 minutes, can you quickly show us how Primavera Cloud can support Task Planner and lean scheduling on the site?
Can do. So here is the schedule on top, and we've got tasks that would be assigned. This is the old days. We can't huddle anymore due to COVID. So we've got a digital planning board that we can do our planning. It's touch enabled. But then this is the new life. We are doing it via Zoom, so we can, on an electronic basis, we can do our pull and push planning. Here would be handoffs, for instance, different, and the different colors that you see on there is for different contractors. Here would be my interactions, handoffs, etc. It can even go down to the field level. So that is an actual screenshot of a tablet that a field worker can do. We've got reporting again, so monitoring and tracking, for example, plan percentage complete. And I'm going to just quickly extend this as a segue into your next conversation. So we look at a common project data, project portfolio, and program data environment. Budgets and schedule dashboard, graphical interfaces. We can look at risk. Here's a risk dashboard as an example. We can have reports. So task reporting, that PPC or project percent complete. We can look at commitment analysis, for instance, reasons for missing our commitments, and you can go and configure that again per your organization. And we also provide the ability for lists and lists and lists of stuff to get it out, or it can easily be exported to Excel. And that is my segue for your conversation. So the portfolio program and projects common data also extends to predictive AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning insight and reporting when bundled with our Oracle Construction Intelligence Cloud.
Excellent. Thanks, Eben. I do appreciate the fact that I've only given you a couple of minutes, but there's quite a bit of information. So if somebody wants some more information, I'm sure you'll help them out with some more insight into this tool.
Can do.
I gave in the beginning a little bit of a plug for common data environment and how we can actually leverage that. Now, from a collaboration point of view, and everybody works in the same environment, we do churn out a lot of data, right? A lot of transactions happening within that project. And for today, we invited Karthik to join us to talk about some very exciting stuff in terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Karthik, can you hear me? You're still on mute. And thank you very much for staying awake all the way from Australia, Karthik. We really appreciate your contribution. Karthik, people talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, and those are really buzzwords that are thrown around a lot. So when we talk about it, when we talk about our new tool, Construction Intelligence Cloud, what does it really mean in terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning for the construction industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mana. And I think the best way to think about definitions is going back to the basics. So what you see on your screen here is a definition from 1959, right? And it talks about AI and machine learning being a field of study that gives the computers the ability to learn. And this is really important, right? It's about the learning process. It's about what computers can allow us to do. But over the years, compute power was a big problem. So when we're talking about definitions, so back in the day, I guess maybe 25 years ago when I was in uni, this definition came along. And I'm sure that when you read this definition, this is scary, right? This is exactly what people think of machine learning. It's got the scary terms, the things that you don't quite understand. But today, when we talk about machine learning, we try and think about it in the simplest way possible. And by that, what we're really talking about is the ability for computers to learn and adapt by using statistical methods. And basically what we're trying to do is trying to look for patterns in data. So all the complexity aside, if you're ever wondering what is machine learning and AI, you're basically trying to use computers to identify patterns so that you can make predictions. That's kind of what it is in a nutshell, Varna.
Yeah, it's quite encouraging for me as a cost professional on projects to finally know somebody's doing something about the problem and not just giving me an Excel spreadsheet to go and crunch the numbers. But what's required for Construction Intelligence Cloud to be able to make these type of predictions, and what sort of predictive insights can we actually get out of Construction Intelligence Cloud?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Construction Intelligence Cloud basically uses scheduling data from P6 and in the future Primavera Cloud that Evan just spoke about, and data from ACNEX. And what I thought I'd do is rather than talk about the types of predictions, I thought it would make sense to show you some of these examples so it's real, right? So one of the things that we're trying to do is make predictions about project delay. So there is a schedule and we have historical data. Could we use machine learning to try and predict what is the probability of delay on this particular project? Why do we make that prediction? What are the factors that are leading to that prediction? And most importantly, what specific activities on your schedule do you need to be worried about? So this is an example of one of the predictions that we make with Construction Intelligence Cloud. Now, a lot of customers say, okay, I get it. So there's a 69% chance of delay on this project, and these are the activities that I need to look at. How do I think about this holistically? All the different activities that might happen on my project. And we have a heat map. So here's all the different WBSs, work breakdown structures, red, amber, green, based on likely delay of that particular activity. But what's even more powerful is the interrelationship between these activities, because these activities are not working in isolation. Everything is related to everything. So the other thing that we did, Vana, is we said, how can we create a network view of the activities? So when we say that some activity is going to be delayed, what's the downstream impact? What other things are going to be impacted? What other trades are going to be impacted? These are some examples of Construction Intelligence Cloud providing predictive insights for scheduling data, right? From P6, from OPC, Primavera Cloud. But we also have ACNEX, and ACNEX, as you know, is a project collaboration tool. We have correspondence and document management. There is a lot of correspondence that's exchanged on ACNEX, and we thought, wouldn't it be great to tap into that correspondence? So using something known as NLP, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard, natural language processing, we wanted to extract text and understand if there was a possibility to pick up litigation issues. When different parties on a project are communicating with each other, could be surface insights. Someone's talking about a breach of contract, someone's calling the cops, someone's worried about contractual obligation. How do we use NLP and techniques like NLP to identify risks? Litigation risk is one example, but we are also trying to pick up health and safety risks. Now, as you know, in large construction and engineering project, this is a big deal. If somebody's done a field inspection and has reported on certain things that need to be addressed, can we surface that up really, really quickly rather than it being hidden in an isolated siloed system? Could we make sure that we are actively working on reducing risk from all sources of data? That's what we are trying to do here. The other big one that we're trying to solve is mismanagement of information. So there's a lot of documents that are typically exchanged on a project. How do you know if that is the latest version, or has that been uprevved? So you run the risk of working off a document that might not be the latest. And that often we know results in rework and change requests and variations and all the bad stuff that we want to avoid. So we're trying to pick that up really early on in the piece and surface that up as insights. We want you to be able to see that, hey, look, this is the current version of the document. This is what you distributed last. Looks like there's a huge gap here. Is that a risk? And perhaps the most important thing with all of this is, once again, the interdependency between the supply chain partners. Again, engineering and construction projects are pretty complex. There's lots of different parties that are involved. So what we wanted to do was amalgamate all that data and sort of say, here's the flow of information between the different parties. Who's sending what information to who? Who's getting delayed? On what? For what? And therefore, you can make good judgments on what might probably be delayed. And again, I'm only giving you some of the examples that we are trying to solve with Construction Intelligence Cloud. But if I had to summarize this, we are trying to understand, is there going to be a delay on the project and why? What activities you might want to look at to prevent that delay from happening? And that comes from schedule data. Is there a possibility of litigation? Is there a possibility of a health and safety issue, a change request, a rework? Or is your supply chain fragile and that's creating risk? These are some of the examples that I can provide in terms of what we're trying to solve with Construction Intelligence Cloud. It's a fairly new product, as you know, and we're building more use cases into it.
Excellent. Now, I know that we already have some customers, different parts of the world live. So it's not that someday we want to present this to our community. It's a reality. But what is really required for a customer to leverage the wealth of historic scheduling data and turn that into predictions? I mean, it's any project controller's dream, being able to predict stuff as opposed to just report on the past. But what's required to put that into real life?
Yeah, I wanted to, I will take you somewhere else first. So if you look at how we consume information today, everything is online, watching movies, streaming music, online shopping. Every single one of these systems makes some form of recommendation to you, right? Oh, you might want to buy this, or you should listen to this song, or this is a movie you might like to watch. If you apply the same logic here, we're trying to do something very similar. So what are the ingredients we need? Well, we need you to use the platform. That's number one, obviously. Number two, we need to be able to collect data. And number three, we can now start to create models and give you those recommendations and predictions that we want you to act upon. The more you act, the more feedback you give us, the better the modeling becomes. The model learns from each of your interactions and tries to get better over time. So what is required? On the scheduling side, we need you to use P6 or Primavera Cloud in the future. We need historical data to train the machine learning algorithm. And we want you to constantly give feedback on the predictions. On the Aconex side, we don't need lots of historical data. The more we have, it's good. But we want you to give us feedback. So in each of those screens, we have this little section called feedback. And you can tell us whether the prediction we made is right or wrong. Is it a false positive or a false negative? And whatever feedback you give us, we will learn from it. We, as in the machine learning algorithm, will pick that up and will get better over time. So what do we need? We need you to use the application. We need you to give feedback. We need historical data.
Okay, good. So here's a trick question. When I use Netflix, their prediction of what movies I would like is quite accurate, right? In comparison to my daughter and my son. So how accurate is the predictions in CIC for a project control team to use that to manage the project?
That's a really, really good question. So prediction is interesting business, right? For everyone on this webinar, think about this. Did you look at the weather forecast today? And did you pause and ask yourself, how accurate is the weather forecast? Number one. And what's the probability or the likelihood of whatever has been predicted will actually happen today? A lot of the times what happens is we take these predictions for granted, but we know that they're never 100% accurate. On the weather forecast side, I have some interesting stats. We actually know that the 5-day weather forecast in most places is about 90% accurate, and the 7-day forecast is about 80% accurate. After that, it starts to wane depending on different regions. The reason I'm drawing the analogy with weather forecast is simply because it's something that most people are used to. And therefore, you would also probably agree that looking at the weather and making decisions is still better than not looking at the weather and making your plans for that weekend picnic, the outdoor barbecue, right? Whatever it is that you're planning. And I think any predictive tool, especially one like Construction Intelligence Cloud, you need to take the same approach. Are you better off having predictions than not? Because it's giving you early warnings. And you might inevitably say, I think that's a bet. We are definitely better off because we can see the predictions. Second, to answer the actual question, you can see accuracy figures within the application. It actually tells you how accurate it is. And the way it does that is it applies a current model to historical data and sees how many times it gets some things right. So you will see an accuracy percentage there. But what is really important, and I can't stress enough, is that accuracy percentage does and will get better over time as it learns from more of your data, as it learns from more of your interactions. And that's why the analogy with Netflix, where you said, Werner, that it gets your predictions quite right. That's because you've been interacting with the system for that long, so it understands, Werner. So any of these technologies require a little bit of time to understand the interactions and understand the data, and the accuracy gets better over time. So how accurate are the predictions? The predictions will depend on the quality of data that you have and how well you interact. In our test seed models, in our pre-training, we see roughly about 60 to 75% accuracy for most predictions, but that differs from customer to customer.
And of course, that's 60% better than what you had before you implemented the solution, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think one last question for you, and it's based on something Terence said. Terence said that some of his contractors are struggling with a complex user interface. How easy do you think it would be for the average project controls person to interact with Construction Intelligence Cloud? And what is Oracle doing to make that user experience an easy one for a normal project team to deal with as opposed to a group of data scientists?
Uh,
Loaded question, I know.
No, absolutely. And it's something that's really, really close to my heart. So one of the things we've been really obsessed about is not making this a data science problem. So behind the scenes, if you had to build this yourself, you need like infrastructure, you need to hire data scientists, you have to build the data pipelines. There's a lot of complexity. But what we want to be able to do is show customers a screen with the insights. So when customers buy the product, we say that within a few weeks, you will see the predictions on your screen. There's nothing else for you to do other than to work with us and understand what's happening. So you see the predictions. A lot of the times customers ask us, so explain to me, what is that predicting? Why is it making that prediction? What activities is the system saying that we're going to be delayed? And what sort of actions can I take? So we've intentionally demystified AI, and I kind of hesitate to use that word because the way we look at AI is it's augmented intelligence. It helps the human make decisions better. We don't expect anyone to become data scientists at all, as long as you can take action based on what you see. So you look at a particular correspondence and you say, okay, it looks like there is potential litigation items that might be happening. The mail item looks litigious, or this here, if I dig into it, I can understand that there might be a health and safety concern, and therefore I need to go and act. That's as far as most people would want to or need to do. How it works and all of that, we've tried to keep it behind the scenes, but for anyone that's really interested, they can learn. And the last bit that I want to call out is the administration of Construction Intelligence Cloud. We've again made it as optional things you can pick up from the interface. And what I mean by that is we often say, if you can select a value from a drop-down, check a box or click a button, you're ready to use this software. You don't need any major training in data science. And we've intentionally focused on that. And we will continue to focus on usability of machine learning. And that's why the analogy with, Netflix and Amazon and more of the B2C that people are used to in their everyday life than a corporate software, which means that there's a big implementation period and you need to understand the nuts and bolts. We've tried to keep it as simple as we possibly can.
Excellent. That's good news. I'd like to thank our panelists today to help us to tell the story all the way from real-world customer experience through to operational systems and into predictive systems. I think from a project controls perspective, I'm very optimistic about the future and how we will be able to manage our capital plans and capital projects into the future. Shannon, I'm going to hand back to you to close the webinar, but before then, I've got one question for Terence, just to make sure that our customer is still with us today. Terence. So Terence, you've heard about all the technology now, and I think there's a lot of digital transformation aspects which we've talked about and you've heard about today. What would you say from a project's organization point of view is maybe the biggest stumbling block to implement and adopt these type of technologies in the operational environment?
Well, then I think there's probably a couple of aspects to it. I think the first one that would come to mind is the older generation adopting newer technologies. That one to me is a bit of a mixed bag. Some of the older generation where we're implementing automation into the operational side, they're actually very pro the automation. It helps them actually not do the mundane tasks, and they can actually focus on how to make the throughput of the plant better. I think that for me, the biggest one is which platform are we going to use? There's a lot of platforms for digitization. There's a lot of competition in the space. And if we just have a look, we're using Zoom for this meeting, but we could be using Google Meet or Microsoft Teams. And when you start getting so many platforms and we're using all of them, then the communication channel actually becomes a little bit cloudy. So I think we'd need to standardize on a platform within an organization and then stick to that rather than diverting off to different things as we go. That's me the biggest challenge.
Excellent. I think, Shannon, I'm looking at the Q&A and there's one from Dr. Giel Becker, which I'd like us to attend to. And Karthik, maybe if you can look at the Q&A. Giel is asking, apart from data input and interaction, what are the biggest challenges preventing the active use of prediction models? So system constraints, people, or resistance to a lack of knowledge, etc. I think, Karthik, this is definitely one for you to answer, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the question. System constraints, yes, but we can solve it, right? We're using data, it's our platforms. So largely we know how to solve the problem. But the people resistance is perhaps the most real thing. How do I believe in these predictions? What do I need to do? What happens if I actually act on these predictions? And most importantly, how does this work? And I think solving those problems perhaps are the biggest challenges. But if you think about the little bit of AI we use in everyday life, imagine how your GPS works, and I was giving the example of weather forecast. How are forecasts made? A lot of the times you'll find that people actually don't know, but people still choose to believe in it because they can see the value. So I think people resistance, in my opinion, is perhaps the biggest hurdle for us to cross, because systems can go a very long way. But if people are not ready to believe in the systems and the power and come along for the journey, that's really hard. And most importantly, like I mentioned about accuracy, these systems are not going to be, 90 and 100% accurate right at the start. So it's about belief in the system. It's belief in the value. It's believing that the recommendations that are being made in the system, you're still better off than not having it, and the value that you get from it. So I would leave you with this simple thought. What is the value of one health and safety incident avoided? Perhaps one human life saved. What is the value of one litigation, one thing not going to court? And therefore, you suddenly find that there's disproportionate value in using this and tools like this and acting on it than perhaps not believing it, because the upside is huge, the downside isn't.
Excellent. Thanks, Karthik. Shannon, I see that the team has been quite active in answering questions in the Q&A while we were busy. I know it's a little bit over 3 o'clock. Can I hand over back to you, Shannon?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Baden. And thank you so much to all the panelists for a very insightful session. I certainly learned a lot, and I hope that our attendees also learned a lot from the panelists. So as Baden said, this does bring us to the end of our webinar. I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to our panelists, Baden Maritz, Terence Hill, Eben van Wyk, and Karthik Venkata Subramanian. Thank you also to the attendees for taking the time to join us to learn more about the golden thread of modern schedule management solutions. If you would like more information, please be sure to visit Oracle Construction and Engineering's website at www.oracle.com. There were also a few links that I shared with you in the chat, so you can look through those if you'd like more information. The recording of today's webinar will also be sent to you in due course. And if you have any additional questions, please do be in touch. You can reach us at shannon@creamermedia.co.za. So thank you very much to our panelists. If anybody's got any last parting words, you're welcome to say those.
Shannon, maybe just briefly, I see Russell's asked a question in the chat or Q&A section.
Yes.
Russell, from my side, I don't have any recommendations in terms of tracking your machinery and people on site. I know we do have quite a bit from the mining equipment where we have productivity tracking, but I just can't quite remember the name of the product that we use. But I think there's a lot of products available in that space. And maybe you would want to touch base with some of the manufacturers and constructors. They do have quite a lot of systems which they're currently using at the moment for that.
Excellent. And from Oracle side, thank you to all the participants for giving us an hour of your life. We really appreciate your participation, and reach out to us if you need some further information. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And I wish you all well. Have a very good afternoon. Stay safe and goodbye.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.